gonna let's get started, and then I think we're definitely gonna leave some time at the end to kind of break up and pray. I know it's probably on many of our hearts what's going on in Ukraine and all that kind of stuff. And we have a number of churches over there actually, and I was able to listen to some of the pastors over there. The churches in Ukraine, the part of our tribe that we're a part of, they call them Love and Healing. That's the name of the church, Love and Healing. And I didn't know that until I start. And most of them are just describing, basically, they've turned into refugee kind of stops for people who are moving out of trying to get to the borders kind of thing. So it's, they haven't fortunately experienced any violence themselves or anything like that, but it'd be great to lift them up and pray for ourselves and all that at the end. But I'm going to try something different this morning. I was telling a few of us, I've just asked a few of us to share a little bit this morning and allow us to interact a bit. And we were able to gather physically last Sunday for the first time in a long time. And it was an experiment. And Jody who's online here was facilitating that beautiful day. And we got to hear from some different people sharing. And it was great, experimenting, doing some new things. And I think today will be kind of a continuation of what God's been saying and doing to us. And so I think in honor of my granddaughter here, I think that was the Spirit of God. On my screen, she's right in the middle. So I thought, okay, I got to give this some attention. And we're going to open it up to talk. But this came from a friend of mine who just he's a doctor. His wife, he's a PhD in engineering things, but his wife was a medical doctor, and she passed away about 2 years ago. And they have grown children, and his oldest daughter, he's been to a Father Heart school up here with us, and quite a story. And I got to hang out with him down in Southern California for a while, got to meet her. And I was so impacted by his wife before she passed away. And she had said to me, we were talking about the intimacy with God and talking about why Jesus came, and that to remove all the stuff so that we could have an intimate relationship with the Father and with God. And so I was asking her about that. How has she navigated 5 years of cancer and as a medical doctor and her faith? And we were sitting on the side of the bed, on a chair, and she was telling me about one time when she went into the hospital, and she was going through a particular hard time. And she teared up as she's telling me it, and I'll never forget it. She said, basically, the Father came into the room and sat on the bed with her. And of course, you don't question. I wasn't like, oh, tell me what he looked like or anything like that. She's just sharing and she said the experience was such that it forever transformed her, and she's never experienced anything like that since or before. And then she said, I would give my right arm to have that experience again. And I've never heard anyone talk that clearly, So all I have to say is, when she did pass away, the memorial for her was incredible. It was an online thing. It was during COVID. And her husband is quite, some of you would know of him. I'm not going to say his name just because it's not that important, but he is a very bright person. And he's written a whole booklet. He sent me a copy to go look through it. It's a story of her life and how the journey into this revelation and into the joy of God. And they were involved with church planning in the years past. They were involved in many other things, obviously the medical community and politics, etc. And so it's been interesting to connect with him since then. And this morning, he sent me a text, and I just wanted to read it to everybody because his daughters had their first grandchild. And so he says, hey, Brent, I know he sent it to, there's a couple other people, but he says, Brent, being around baby, Andrews is the baby's name, reminds me of the disciples asking Jesus who was the greatest in the kingdom. And he called the little one to his side and he said, well, learn this well. Unless you dramatically change your way of thinking and become teachable like a little child, you'll never be able to enter in. Whoever continually humbles himself to become like this little child is the greatest one. Matthew 18, 1-4. And he goes on, he just says, the greatest example is a child. What did Jesus mean by being like a child? Children are to be unconditionally loved. In the security of perfect love, there is no fear, no stress, except waiting for the next feeding, of course, and no anticipation of harm or evil. The focus is on simply receiving, resting, and reliance without being driven by performance. There is a content confidence in being loved that results in pure joy. A child often knows no bounds and is fascinated by new realms of discovery. Everything in the world is an invitation for a child to experience a good Father God. I remember work as a young child was just an opportunity to play with dad, and tools were just a toy. We do not remain as a baby wrapped in swaddling clothes as life brings increasingly self-responsibility, but Jesus was admonishing us to remain childlike in our heart relationship with Papa God. There is an innocence that comes with right alignment with the Father. It is interesting that Adam and Eve were naked and unashamed when living in the garden like a newborn baby. We are to be childlike recipients of the Father's love and conduits of the Father's love to others. And quote, and if you tenderly care for this little one on my behalf, you are tenderly caring for me. If you remember that verse, what you do unto the least of these, you do unto me. Jesus continued with a warning to those who did not demonstrate the caring love. It would be better to have a large millstone hung around their neck and be drowned in the sea. What would a world look like if there was nothing else, where nothing else experienced other than perfect love? Heaven on earth. What would that look like? And if I ever wonder why we even seek to want to be together with others, is there something in our hearts? Sometimes we're receiving, sometimes we need to be encouraged, sometimes we're in a place of, we have things that he's put in us that we can share with others. But at the end of the day, we're coming with our childlike heart as best as possible, that this, what we just read, would be multiplied, would be magnified in us and through us and around us. And I think that's one of the greatest realities of what it means to be in his family. We were talking this morning as we got started, a couple of people are going to be sharing a little bit. And one of the things that I was talking about, it's always been interesting to me that when we talk about when Christians gather, that we call it going to church. And of course, if you're in China, some of you, I know, Safra, you're very familiar with the underground church there. And one of my favorites is that one in Ethiopia where they gather in a hole in the ground, a cave. But they don't talk about going to it. There just happens to be where they meet, and they can move all over. In China, as you know, back in the day, they couldn't announce where they were actually going to physically meet because they didn't want the government to know. And so you literally had to pray and listen and discern where they were going to go. And when you hear those stories, it's just profound. But the reality being this, that what is it like to see ourselves as the church? Jesus only used the term twice, actually, in the Gospels, or it's been recorded, but he used the term the kingdom of God over 156 times. He talked more about that than any other thing other than the Father. And so I find it fascinating that today we're gathering, and we're going to listen to some, and this is kind of a pickup from a while ago, but there's been this journey that most of us can talk about and experience around us. We've been living in a world that's being shaken, and we're being shaken. And some of the shaking is anything, as it says in Hebrews, in that shaking, the point of shaking, if it's shakeable, it's going to get shaken. But what's the point? So that which cannot be shaken would remain. And that is what I just read from my friend here about his experience of holding his first grandchild. And him and I've had some long talks. I've read some of his stuff, and we talk about what it means not to know about God in our heads, but to experience him in our hearts. And the shaking of the loss of his wife, the shaking of one of his dreams yet not coming to pass, that has been 20 some odd years in the making, the shaking of so many different things, is boiling down to, what remains, the source of joy, the source of life, the source of peace, the source of rest. And that's why we get to celebrate, count it all joy. It's very interesting for those who we've kind of had watching a lot of news around here the last few days, just because of the Ukraine situation and the reality of what the hardening of the heart of Mr. Putin is pretty profound to watch. Every time he speaks, it just gets harder. And what's interesting is watching in the midst of that, what does this mean to have a childlike heart? What does this mean for the people who are on the ground there? And for anyone who's done this yet, and you imagine for myself, I can't even imagine, for my son and my son-in-law or my daughter to head to the Polish border and say goodbye to their brothers and their fathers who are choosing to go back and make a stand and lay in front of a tank or do whatever it is they feel compelled to do. And the chances of them not seeing each other again, it's a pretty real deal when you compare that with the words of Jesus. The greatest gift that you can give to someone is your life. Not that you have to give it up in the sense of die, but that's a possibility. And it just strikes me how unrational those things are for some. And they go, look, why wouldn't they just let the army take care of it? But it's a really tough thing, because in that DNA, there's something that love says. And I'm not advocating anything about the dynamics of what's going on. I'm just, when I listen to our pastors who are on the ground there, I find it fascinating that like I said earlier, I didn't know they called their churches Love and Healing. And these doors are opening up, and people will stay with them 2 to 3 days on their travels. And they are sitting with people who are in this process of having everything shaken and en route. And you go, but when you talk to them, there's joy. There's just joy in these guys. And I'm going, you don't get to see that on the TV. You get to see the other side of things. So in the kingdom, it's joy. So, yeah. But we're going to step in and there's no particular big theme to this, but some of the people I've asked to share were, some of them were there last week when we gathered, some weren't. And whatever's going to be in their hearts is going to come out, and I pray it's a blessing for us. And even if we just camped out on becoming little children again and just, let that be the center today, I'd be happy for myself. Come on over, all the grandkids. Let's go jump in a pool and be kids. But yeah. Father, thank you for today. We thank you for bringing us together, and we are grateful. Just there is no words that we could express. We can't tell you what you already know. You say you know what we have need of even before we ask you. But you invite us to be with you, and we're with you now. We know that you're in our hearts, and I thank you that you are like what we just heard, that our hearts would be open like children. We're expecting adventure today. We're expecting to go in places in our hearts, regardless of what's going on around us. We lay all that aside. We lay aside right now the weight and the burdens and the things that have tried to discourage us, whether it's our health or our situations or the news. And we, at this point, we say, yes, we want to be your children. We open our hearts to receive this adventure today, what you have for us. Yeah. I feel I'm going to kick it off with you, Lance. I feel like you're in my left-hand corner. So how do you feel about that?
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, love to. Yeah, so we this is going back to March earlier. Sorry, I said earlier in February. We did some listening. So I think it's really important just to give the context here. I know some of you, Jody did a good job, I've heard last week, of sharing what I had heard, but there was a few of us that listened um, uh, to God and just were listening. Well, God, what are you saying about our tribe and what our gatherings look like? So I just want to share that because I think it's good context to what we're doing here today. So, yeah, this is what I heard. So I said, Father, what are you saying about our tribe's gatherings? So come as one heart, one mind, one spirit when you gather. I am more concerned about this than what you plan. I anoint the unity in spirit, and you can do more than you imagine when you walk in unity. Listen for me, but also listen to what I put in each other's hearts. Honor me by honoring your brother and sister. Let what I put in each other's hearts come out. Remember, deep inside is the masterpiece I created in each of you. I honor the planning when it comes to organizing a date and time. I honor the planning for the children. I honor the planning so that there's an environment that encourages my sons and daughters to experience my love. I honor spending time listening. I honor spending time in listening and what I am doing in my sons and daughters. Just do what you are sensing I am already doing. Go where you are sensing I am already going. I want to release you from making mistakes with my love. That is an old wineskin, is making mistakes. Now I want you to experience my love and in the promised land. Wherever your foot may tread, I have given you to steward in my love. That's Joshua 1:3. Start with what's in each of your hearts. If your first feeling is hesitation, I challenge you to sense if that's me. I'm giving you much more freedom to experiment than you know. As you step out and experiment, you will clearly know if you heard me and are walking in the Spirit. As you step out, you will either walk on water or you will not. Again, I do say a house that is divided will easily fall. Begin and end in unity with each other, and I will anoint that. You are further into the promised land than you think. So I kind of get a sense that's for us on Sunday gathering, but as I'm reading it, like I think this is also for a lot of us personally, right? There's the free, like some of the things that just come out is just now I want you to experiment in my love in the promised land. Um, and just the comment I felt God saying is just like he's he he's giving us more freedom than we expect. You know, if we've been orphan hearted and just following rules and just being told from God, okay, we're like, and this is my story. God, tell me what to do, and I'll just do it, and be kind of mindless and heartless, just being just an obedient slave, or I don't know what the right word is, but this whole journey of being a true son, a true daughter, is God has created us a masterpiece in the heart, and He lives in our heart. And some of the dreams and some of the things that are in your heart are actually His heart. And you can quickly check, with your friends, like, hey, this is what I'm sensing to do. And with some believers, mature believers around you, And if they're all giving you thumbs up, like that's a good check. And obviously check in the Word of God. But if I'm assuming as believers we understand that, but if there's that ability, or if that's that desire in your heart to go and do something, I think God's giving us a lot more freedom and sonship to experiment, to step further into the promised land, so to speak. And I'm right there too. I have desires in my heart that I do believe are of God. And so I feel like this morning he's saying that is that I want to release you from making mistakes with my love. This is an old wineskin, like the making mistakes. That's the knowledge of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, is what's right, what's wrong, God. I just want to do what's right. Versus I'm a son and I get to walk with my Father, with Jesus, with Holy Spirit, and go on this journey with him of the revealing of my heart to those around me, and seeing how that love, that fragrance touches other people. I think that's an amazing journey. And obviously this was kind of talking about gatherings, but as we all are living our most authentic self, most open-hearted, that fragrance is gonna mix with every other open-hearted fragrance of every other person, and then we all leave more full of the knowledge of God, more full of the love of God, because other people have lived open-hearted.
It's really good. The when I think of when I was reading from my friend there, Lance, that children, childlike heart, doesn't ask to what to do next, right? they could do it. Can I have permission? Maybe as they get a little bit older, when they learn there's rules in certain homes or something. But when you're in that pure, they don't think of failing and making mistakes. They just that's how they learn. That's how they grow. That's how they experience. Yeah.
Well, and then I just think of, is that your granddaughter? Is it Bella? Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
She's just like, I want to go over to Papa's house and go for a hot tub, right? Like she's not thinking, does Papa want me to do that? And maybe I should pray about that for 3 days and fast. She just was open-hearted, and she knows that Papa, you are loving and inviting, and she's excited to do that. So that really touched me. Just children always do that, right? They're just so free to express what's in their hearts because it's pure. So I think that just ties in what you said earlier. It's like the kingdom of God is being, the childlike enter the kingdom of God and walk in the promised land because they're open-hearted and they sense Father's love, like a son or a daughter. Like that's a sign of sonship, is like knowing you're loved. It's like it's inherently in you. Like, and again, it's a journey, but there might be those moments when you're like, I know I am loved. And then that's that spark, that freedom to just go in further into the promised land. But I do sense almost, I do want to say this, is that it's one thing to go quote unquote that freedom to go into the hot tub or just go do some of the desires of your heart. But I actually think there's a lot of us on the screen right now that have really big heart dreams. So I feel God saying, okay, go into the hot tub, but that's just step one. Like continue, like you might have a big desire in your heart. And I do sense Father going, yes, do it with me, but go for it, son. Go for it, daughter. Like, Nolan, I don't know you, but whatever's in your heart, I think God's put some amazing things in you because God created you a masterpiece. So those things, man, like, as you pray them through, like some of those things, God wants to come, for them to come to pass through you and through your heart coming alive, And so I just, and I speak that all over all of us, is that part of the things that feel they're actually impossible, and then they're generational. So if you have a dream that is going to go beyond your lifetime and it actually feels impossible, those are probably of God, because you need the impossible to happen, and they're going to go beyond your lifetime because it's the Spirit of God that's going to be the continuity into the next generation, into the next generation. And as we know, it's a story, right? So we're part of that story. So we just pass that baton of his love and whatever he's put in your heart into the next generation. So
Really good, Lance. I just got to follow that up right now. If your heart, I get this sense, if your heart just received that, yes, there's that. I have something. I feel like this is part of it getting stirred back up. It's kind of like Paul saying, Timothy, stir up that which is within you that came through the laying on of hands at some point in time. Someone spoke into your life. Somebody has spoken into things, and yet the dreams can feel like they've died, or how long will it take, or how comes the circumstances, and yet he hasn't forsaken you. He's never left us. He's never leave us behind. My word is yes and amen to you. And so I just feel for some of us here, as you're speaking, Lance, I was feeling for sure some things that he's been reminding me of things that I've let, they've just gone silent. And so I just want to, encourage you, everyone, to now just receive. There's a childlikeness when Eric or Jody, either of you can share this, but Eric, there was a story you talked about that I just wanted just really quick about that, when you told your kids about the dream of going to Disneyland. And tell us what happened that next morning. The childlikeness in your son's heart.
I think this is I think this might be a Jody. She knows the story. I wasn't there. She told me, so I'll let her.
Okay. It wasn't Disneyland. It was, I think we were going to the West Coast or something like that. I think anyways, this was a while back, but it was so profound. I think that's where we were going anyway. We told them that we were heading on this trip. This was probably 3-4 years ago, at least. But it was a big mistake in one sense. Tell me if this is the right story. But they woke up the next morning. So we told them, and they woke up the next morning. My son had literally packed his bags, and this trip wasn't for another month. And so that's a big parenting flaw there, because our poor children then had to wait forever to go. But we told them where we were heading, and they were ready to go the next day. I don't know, is that the story that you meant, or is there another one, Brent? Yeah, it was hilarious. And then it was just terrible to have to tell them it was a month away. But nonetheless, they just fully believed that that's where we were heading, and we're all in, literally packed. Just sorry, kids, are bad. But nonetheless, just that childlike heart of just belief in whatever that adventure was. He'd never been to the ocean before. That's what it was. It was the story of going to see the ocean, and he was ready, bathing suit, goggles, the whole thing. Packed.
I love it, because here's what I heard in that is when you first told that story to me, and then it just picks up with what Lance just did here and what God just said through him, is that our good Father, you're throwing yourself under the bus. You're great parents, but I don't know what the lesson is. Maybe you should have waited until the day before you're going to go or something, because of his heart. But I think he's a good Father. And for those of you who received that sense, like it started with you, Nolan, but if there was that sense of yes, if your heart went yes, it's going to be true. It's now you, like a child would then go, I'm going to get ready. I'm going to get my bag packed. I'm going to prepare. He didn't go back to Ben going, I've been down this road before, and I'm going to, sometimes of us have had wounds like that. We've got promises or things that maybe were given through somebody at the wrong time or the wrong way, or our hearts weren't prepared. But I just get this sense right now, as Lance was saying, that if your heart went, that means there's life, there's free. It's not for everybody necessarily, but there's something in that. And in a childlike heart, even after today or after this time we have together, you can just go, okay, allow that to bubble up and nurture, and maybe you're supposed to pack a bag with goggles and and whatever. So that's why that was a neat story. Don't even want to ask you what you think you did wrong in it, but that was great.
Only the poor kid had to wait for a month, and he just had no concept of time. That's what I did. But as we, he fully trusted. He cried for the first little bit, but there is that trust, and he never let go of it for the whole month. And we had a countdown and the whole bit. We jumped into the celebration of waiting with both kids, and then and then there was also, actually, I'll just add this because I thought of it, but there's a neat preparation in the process. Like, we actually studied what the ocean was, and we got to look into like where we would go, where we would stay. And then the anticipation and the experience wasn't as like, it was fulfilling something that came out in relationship on the way there. So it was good. We did it in advance. It's just the reaction and the heartbrokenness when we weren't loading up in the second was what we had done wrong.
It's so rich, though, that the key being his heart, even if it was a bit disappointed in terms of timing, as it is with any children. Like, can we go over to Papa's, jump in his hot tub now? Like, what? If the answer is yes, why are we waiting? Kind of thing. But I love the fact that a good parent, a good parenting, a good father will keep us, keep that attention in front of us, as we allow that. Anyway, I want to over Dave and Sandy and Jen. These are the ones that are lined up to go. So go ahead, Jen, or Dave. Sorry.
And Betty, and you, the above. So there's been a whole bunch of neat things happening. Like in the last 2 years, there's been an expression around coming out of the 20-somethings and the 30-somethings that they're learning how to adult. Like, they've turned it into a verb. And I think God's taking us through learning how to child. And it's been pretty cool because there's a transition involved in that. Some people, like last week, there was some amazing stuff that was coming out. But what does that look like practically in everyday life? And sometimes a broad idea or a statement from God can leave people a little bit wandering in the wilderness, because what does that actually mean on Tuesday morning? And it's like, one of the things that really stood out for me last week was what Rob was sharing, where he said he wants us to meet together to connect with him. He wants us to be together individually. I'm probably quoting this badly, but to be with him, to connect with him. And there is a real emphasis all the way through that whole morning from all the speakers on that. And just over the last week, I've been trying to think through, because there's a lot of discomfort in some people about the vagueness of some of this, or it's vague to them, because you're maybe used to the church structure, meetings, organizations, bringing the big trailer in every Sunday morning with half a dozen people and unloading a pile of stuff and setting it up. And there can be a comfort in that because it's regular, it's normal, we're used to that. And it's so far from what God's final destination for us. One of the things I've realized in the last couple of years is that his end game is the Garden of Eden, where he's with us, unfettered, no restrictions, no break, no fig leaves. That's his end game. And we're not there, but we're on our way. So coming out of that, I thought, so what does the body look like? What should the body look like compared to what God looks like in all of this? And I know in my past life, the most extreme thing I saw in church was wildly organized bus ministries, Sunday schools, like Wednesday nights, Thursday nights, Friday morning, Sunday morning, noon, and night. And it was massively organized. years of people's lives went into organizing this stuff. And I have to be completely honest, when you looked year upon year, people were frequently in the same struggles, in the same place, including me. And it wasn't fruitful. And then there's sort of God was a distant topic quite often. He wasn't present every day, didn't feel like it. He was, didn't feel like it. We didn't see a lot we could attribute to God. So all of this effort didn't seem to be bearing much fruit. And then on the other end, we get into this thing where we're resting and turning over to God what I believe is rightfully his. And we start seeing this crazy fruit, things happening in people's lives daily. Growth, peace, spiritual happenings going on all the time that can't be attributed to anything other than God. So I'm sitting there thinking, where's the dividing line? And I wonder, has the church taken on a bunch of God's responsibility, perhaps? And Francis Chan, for those of you who don't know him, he was a very successful pastor, big place, blah, blah, blah. And God spoke to him and he split because, God said to him that this isn't going to come to pass in this particular body at this particular time. So he left. One of the things he said that really stuck with me is, if you're in the body and you're in some type of ministry or organization or doing something and you are seriously stressed out by it, chances are you've taken on something that was God's responsibility to start with. That hit really deep. And as I've been going through this, I've realized the body in a more Western organized form can take on the role of God, where everybody who comes through that door, we are responsible for their spiritual well-being in every respect. And I realized that is taking on God's role. And where that really comes from in my own life is when I went through about a 4 or 5 year period where I was kind of awaking to God, and there's something out there that can't quite put my finger on it. The bulk of what happened in that period, a small portion of it was from believers coming into my life, sharing a little bit, doing whatever. The bulk of it was God, because God can be around nagging me at 3 o'clock in the morning, whereas most other people can't. I use that tongue in cheek. He wasn't nagging. So if we are in a place where we feel the world's salvation relies on how successful the church is, we've taken on God's role big time, and it's not going to work. So that's been a real revelation for me. And it can be really hard to give out the activities because on paper they look really good. We're busy, we've done this, look what we've done that. Our heart's connecting with God. And so what Rob was sharing last week is, God's laying out all this stuff and everyone ended to connect with me. That, to me, is a big part of who we are and what we do. It's almost like we're a glorified dating service. We're introducing people to God. We're not being God. We were never intended to be. And that brings rest. If you're stressed, step back and examine that. If somebody comes into the body, the church, the gathering, and they're obviously hurting, well, it's not really our place to say, oh, God will take care of that, I'm going for coffee. There's some just some obvious stuff out there. But to take on the role of God and think their life, spiritual health relies on me, now we're trying to do God's job instead of letting God. That all comes out of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That gave us knowledge of good and evil. We were not only able to measure bad stuff, we were able to measure good stuff. And so in our head, it was like, well, if I get a really big thing going in church, that's a plus. When in fact, he's simply about relationship. One of the things that struck me in the last little while is that Jesus generally didn't work up a sweat. He walked through life and he touched people's lives. They touched his robe and got healed. He didn't actually have organizational meetings and board meetings and flowcharts and schedules. He just walked through life and he changed the entire world. That's what I want. It's often that as God's doing a deeper and deeper work in you, you go through and you don't even know what you've left behind, but you hear about some of it later. That's where I want to be. Not because I'm lazy, I am, but I want to bear good fruit. And backing off and letting God into my life, that's where the fruit comes from. The other thing that's really hit me is at Pentecost, when they were in the upper room, something happened. Like, quite often people get saved and the church says, now go out and save the world. They forget the upper room bit. They went into the upper room, the 120 of them. When they came out, there was 3,000 people added to the church that day. That did not happen because they had an evangelism session. They didn't go out and sign people up to be members of the church. They didn't fill out forms. 3,000 people were added because they saw something tangible that was so attractive that I'm in. They didn't have time for a Bible college course. I don't think they even had time for teaching. One day, 3,000 people. There was something significant there. And in our very well-educated culture, we've kind of substituted that if you take one more seminar, one more weekend away, eventually you'll get there. So I'm realizing not the futility of that, but the inefficiency of that. Whole lot of effort for a little bit of gain. Like in my life, I've gone through a few seasons of counseling. They brought benefit. They were not useless, but they were small compared to the change in my life from an actual connection with God. I'm not one of these people who has a connection with God every second hour through the day. It's more like every second year of the decade. I'm a bit of a slow learner that way, but I can tell you those times were instantaneous and massive. So that's where I see our role is. It's not to run the big organization. It's to connect. On Sundays, sure, but that's not it. It's last night when we're with friends having dinner. It's today, certainly. It's Brant sitting in our garage with Cease and Sue during a thunderstorm in COVID, freezing our buns off, having a cider or whatever we had that day. That's the body. It's me sitting with my lead at work who's going through a crisis and just talking about who God is to him. That's the body. And I'm finding as it becomes less structured, it's becoming way more effective. And that is counterintuitive to the way our culture runs. You know, you look at business, go, work hard, organize, plan. And the kingdom is the opposite. Back off and let God come and see what he does through you. So those are a few of my thoughts. That transition that we're talking about that never seems to end. And by the way, the transition is never going to end and until he says it ends. It's okay. Just bear in mind, put everything on the altar, every preconceived thought you have about the kingdom, that it should be this structure, this organization, just put that on the altar and see what he gives back to you. Because not everything that's been done in the course of history is bad. But he's bringing us into a new season and it's well on its way. Sit and talk with people who are kind of freaked out by this. We want to transition all of us from having our spiritual support in the body to primarily having it from God himself with some support from the body. For some people, that's going to be a big, scary shift. And I think COVID was actually one of the drivers behind that. So let's encourage, lift up, let them know it's going to be okay. Share your heart, share your lives, and we will move on in this together.
Thank you, Dave. That's amazing. So much in that. I'm going to if you have a question or something like with that stirring something, you kind of keep track of that. And we're going to come full circle because I really want to honor the other people speaking as well. So, Dave, do you want to introduce your other half, the better half?
I do.
Okay.
In the upper right-hand corner, at least on my screen, is Sandy Kay.
You know what? I just really have been loving what Lance and Dave have shared. And, Dave and I were talking about this, and a lot of that stuff, came out through what Dave shared. And I don't really have anything that I want to add to this. So, yeah, thank you, though, Brent. So I'm just going to let you move on to the next person. It's so good. Yeah, thank you, guys.
Could I ask you to share just a little piece about your heart? You shared about that, the practical reality of what's been said, how it affected you a little while back. You were sharing. You don't feel like you have to share that, but
there is a shift happening in my heart. One thing I will share a tiny bit about last Sunday is that I really appreciate that there are those in the body that are so willing to hear from God about what we're doing. He never leaves us alone in the midst of anything, and that we can hear from him and hear what he is doing and hear what he's stirring, so that it can encourage the body. And so, like Lance and Jen and Rob and those guys bringing forward, and Jody, the things that God is saying, and that just brings such great comfort and encouragement. But there's a shift happening in my own heart. Like I was sharing earlier this morning that typically, see, now I'm sharing, Brent, typically through my own Christian walk over the years, I am one of those Christians that has been coming in the door, and I have needed a great deal of propping up. I've needed to be propped up by the pastor in the front. I've needed to be propped up by books and by teachings and by other, speakers or YouTube or things like that. I would come to church and I would be poured into. And then as I went away in the week, I would leak, and then I would need the midweek thing to prop me up again. And I never felt like I was actually making that heart connection with God. And not quite knowing what I was missing. And I recognized, it was said over and over again during COVID. I've heard Brant say it, I've heard others say it, that it's as though some of the distractions and people in our lives and structures of church, and structures in church have not been bad. Please don't think that anybody is saying that. But if they prop you up, they're not serving the purpose that they were meant to serve. And so some of these things were stripped away from us, like the whole world, they were stripped away. And we ended up finding ourselves in a place where it was just us and our own hearts and God, and we didn't know what to do with that. And so we've come through 2 years of that. And it's only really been the last while that I've been sensing a shift in my heart as I've really leaned into him. And a few weeks ago, I had a week coming up where I was off work 2 weeks ago. And I just had this sense that, I had this sense that God was that to go to Kingsfold for just a 2-night retreat in that week off. And so I thought, that's kind of a neat idea. I've always wanted to go there. I know lots of friends have gone there. I've never been there. And so I started looking into it, and then I made a plan to go, and I felt this excitement inside of me, like a child, kind of like Jody talking about the kids that were told they're going to go to the West Coast. And I felt like, I'm going to go to Kingsfold. And I actually pulled out a suitcase and started throwing stuff in it in my closet for things that I wanted to bring. And I felt really excited. And in the process, it was probably a week and a half before I went that I thought about this. I heard this voice say, come away with me. And every time I pictured Father's face, there was this excitement and anticipation that I was seeing in my spirit of his actual face about this trip. And I have to say, when I went there, it was not like going to any other conference or weekend away or anything. When I went there, I felt like I was led by my heart and that I was following my heart from one thing to the next. And like Lance was saying, that don't worry about making mistakes, because mistakes are the old wineskin. Yeah, we don't have to worry about that stuff. And we can come as children and we can say, Papa, I want to go in the hot tub with you, and know that God is just so pleased to have that fun time. And I felt like I was following my heart through that. And it was a very different experience. And I'm starting to really come into this place of understanding more of what it is to be a child, and that my heart is not wrong, that my heart really can't make mistakes in God if I'm following it, that he is actually in those things that I love. And yeah, I'm kind of still in this transition of where my heart's being to, getting to this place where and excited to be getting into this place where I don't need to be propped up, and that my connection with my Father is everything that I need to bring his life to me, and his peace and his comfort and everything, but also to bring that to others. So yeah, so it's really awesome what's going on. And yeah, I want more of him. I want to know him in ways that I've not known him before. And is it scary to think that that things are changing? It could be, but the more that I lean into him and press into him, the more confidence I feel in his love for not just me, but for all of us. Yeah. And he never leaves us or forsakes us. And he'll actually tell us what's going on in the journey, even if we can't see specifically what's coming, what's happening. There's this peace and comfort that comes that we know that he's already there, that he's in the journey with us. Yeah, we can trust him. Yeah,
it's amazing. I'm so grateful that you had. I'm so grateful I asked you to. Yeah, because there's something not just in your journey, but you said something that's was life-giving, and I think this is a word similar to Lance's, but there is a place. A few weeks ago, I felt to talk about the new wine and the new wineskins, and most people are looking for the new wineskin. What's the new structures? I mean, we're not talking about just our communal, but around the nation and in the world. What's the new wineskin? What's it going to look like? Could you please tell us so we can just start getting put our security in that structure, or in that, it's exciting when you build a new thing. Everybody gets excited because it looks like, okay, we're building something new and it's going to be fresh and all that kind of stuff. But he's very clear that the wineskin is your heart, and focus on the new wine. And your heart is the expansion. That's where your tent pegs, grow. That's where you're more than conquerors. That's where all of that stuff happens within. That's the kingdom within you. And so I feel that there's a word. If you feel like there's a stuckness in your heart and it's a bit nervous about going forward, there is no fear in love. Perfect love casts it out. And maybe there's some old wine in there. There's some things, and to go away with him to whatever that looks like, and just let that out, and preparation for what's ahead. And I know it's so tempting to want to look for the physicalness of it, the security of, having something clear that I can but I think you said it really well, Dave, how many years have people done that? And there's an initial excitement, but then you look after a few years, the efficiency of versus just stealing away with him. Really key. So Entheos and Kingsfold is an amazing place to go do that. So my better half, Jen, I know you've been fighting through the health thing a little bit this week as I live with you. And but you felt
I wasn't on earlier. I am struggling a little bit with my health, but I felt that I had a short word, and you know what? I can rest later this afternoon. So I'm here. I wasn't on earlier to visit. Anyways, maybe it was already commented on, but so good to see you, Wendy and Jose. Lovely to see you. We miss you. I know you're having an amazing time there, but it'll be wonderful when you're back with us too. I love the analogy that Jody gave of, I think it was mostly Alex, maybe it was both her kids. It really reminded me of Alex and Allegra's hearts and how that can compare to our hearts and where our hearts should be with kids with Father when we get a prophetic word. And then there's a gap between when we get the word, the promise, and the time that it's actually manifest, that it actually is fulfilled. But that really spoke to me, that example, because, you know, when we stay in the knowledge of the tree of life, we continue to dream with him. And Lance talked about dreaming and believing every promise and prophetic word he's put in our lives. And sometimes we start to doubt when there's a time lag. And there's something about declaring, there's something about keeping our hearts childlike, like children, like Alex and Allegra, where they never doubted. I mean, maybe they were sad initially, as I've been, when all of a sudden I realized, well, this prophetic word isn't happening yet, but it's like never doubting that he's a good Father. And when he has spoken it, he's faithful and it is going to come to pass. And often it is the things that he's working on in our heart until we're ready to actually live in that and be that word that he's spoken. Anyways, and Sandy, I agree with Bran. I'm so glad that he provoked you because what you said was so good. There's so much in you. Anyways, mine is totally different, but that's what I think I'd felt from the Lord for today. It was a shotgun Sunday, and we're the body, and we get to hear what's in people's hearts, which actually is going to feed us because he's speaking to each one of us, and we're all getting different things or getting further expansions on some of the things that he's giving all of us. Anyways, my word is on peace, and I feel like it's a timely word. In the context of world events, I know we're not of this kingdom, we're of his kingdom, but I do have an intercessor's heart. And when I put the TV on, I just start crying when I see the news. So I have to be careful how much I put it on. But I'm going to share a verse. Then I'm going to share a vision I got. And I just hope this blesses you a little bit or speaks to your hearts or some of your hearts. In John 14:27, in the Passion Translation, Jesus says, I leave the gift of peace with you, my peace. Wow. Not the fragile peace given by the world, but my perfect peace. Don't yield to fear or be troubled in your hearts. Instead, be courageous. There's something of a fighter in me. Every time I hear the word be courageous, I like to rise up, like, get a sword in my hand, fight. Anyways, probably for some time, probably the last several years, maybe even since my daughter's original diagnosis in 2019, God has given me that word. I meditated that scripture. I meditated on it almost daily. It's almost like a rhema word to me. And as I ponder on the gift of peace I give you, it's always seemed to me like it's a gift. It was something he was actually transferring to me, a transaction, like something, a substance, like a tangible substance. I was very aware this was really real. This gift of peace, and he's giving it to me. And almost like a coach, then he would say, and don't yield to fear. I could see myself almost like caving in, wimping out, kind of fading away. He's like, don't. Be courageous. Oops, I got a dog barking at my door. We'll just keep going. But have you ever had a progressive vision or a vision that you've gotten that's expanded? I don't know. I just experienced that in the last couple of weeks, with this verse and with a picture he gave me. And maybe you've experienced this, but he gave me more. He expanded on it. So this verse, like as I was meditating on the sense of peace being a tangible substance, it became a vision. And as I'm walking and just sort of soaking with him, I have this picture now. And for any of you that you just take it, receive it, it's almost like peace is a tangible substance. He actually, it's like, for me, the picture is like a medallion, maybe 3 or 4 centimeters. And for some reason, maybe because he knows I like color, it's got the swirlies in it, the spirally swirly, like you would see on your computer when you don't want to see that swirly ball. But it's like I'm walking and maybe I have a wrap top or something on, but it's almost like I sense he's inserting that medallion of peace into my heart. And I know he's doing that for my daughter, Amy, as well. I sensed it was for both of us. But it was like it just reinforced this peace. This is a tangible substance, and he gives it. He puts it in our hearts, and we can receive it. So just last week, I listened to another prophetic word, and it just reminded me of the vision that I got, and just reinforced, this is true. This is what he's saying to me. And so I want to share that with you. I was listening on to Christine Larkin. Don't know if you've heard of her. She's with the British Isle Council of Prophets. She's also, I Googled her. She's also been trained with Graham Cook. She's been going around the world prophesying for over 20 years. I think she was with the Elijah House Ministry for a while as well. Anyways, I just listened to her last Monday, and her vision just was so similar, different vision, but same understanding. She said, and it's in the context of we need peace right now. There's so much unrest in the world. Our hearts can go to fear and anxiety, as well as other things going on in our personal lives. But we need to reach out to him, the Prince of Peace, and keep our hearts in a state of peace. Her story is that during the Kuwait War, I think it was the first one. No, sorry, the Gulf War, pardon me. She was, it was around 2010. She couldn't quite remember. She had accepted an invitation to speak in Kuwait. She was going to cancel because war was breaking out. And her husband, wow, I can't believe it. But anyway, I was like, wow, what a brave guy. So much faith. He said to her, well, why would you cancel your appointment if the Lord hasn't told you to cancel your appointment and he told you to go? Like, whoa. I mean, wow, this is really a brave husband to release his wife. And she thought, oh, yeah, why would I? So she flew over. She said she was the only one on the plane, except soldiers. She landed on the tarmac. The soldiers left. She was just left there. And all of a sudden, she started to feel the fear coming. And then all this, like, what have I done? And then all of a sudden, she said, she felt like on her head, she called it a squishy mushroom or a marshmallow. And she said it was his peace. And she said his peace is a tangible substance. And so I just encourage you, it is a tangible substance. And it just reinforced to me what he's been saying to me. He says, don't let your hearts be troubled. I give you the gift of peace. It's not a fragile peace like the world's peace. It's my perfect peace. And, you know, this does go along. I was thinking about this. This does go along with what James Jordan talks about. When we receive his love is a tangible substance. It's just not an esoteric, it's not just an idea. It's just not the knowledge that we know he loves us. It's a tangible substance. When we ask him to fill our heart with his love, he fills it with a tangible substance. And it goes along with all the fruits of the Spirit. We don't need to ask him for more patience, because when we receive him and his love, in it is patience. We don't need to ask him for more joy, because when we receive his love, he is joy. We're receiving that. And it follows, with peace. We are receiving his love. We're receiving him. He is the Prince of Peace. And it's a tangible substance. We all need peace in this season. We have personal situations we're going through, but with what's going on in the world, we need to pray for peace, peaceful solutions, peace and protection for innocent civilians and children, families being separated, young men fighting. And we need to stay in his peace in these troubling times. I know for me, even, and Christine was saying this as well, I need to, yes, be aware of what's going on, but sometimes I have to limit how much of the news I'm watching, because if my heart gets overly burdened, overly sad, overly troubled, it's like, no, I'm not staying in peace. He is the Prince of Peace. And it reminds me of Psalm 46, where he says, nations are in an uproar, kingdoms fall. He lifts his voice and the earth melts. He is sovereign. He is the King of Kings. He is in control, and he gives us his peace. I just want to share, if I can, one more verse on peace. It's a sort of a little bit of a change in the direction on peace. But it's I'm going to read it. And it was opened up to me last week more in the context of reconciliation and conflict resolution. But you're all familiar with James 3:17 and 18. But the wisdom that comes from heaven is, first of all, pure, then peace-loving. There's that word, peace-loving. Considerate, submissive, full of mercy and good fruit, impartial and sincere. Peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. As I said, this verse was opened up to me in the context of conflict resolution, reconciliation. But I'll just give an example in my own life where I've experienced this, and often what the Lord's wrought in you can share. Where, I'm a prophetic type. You sense that I need to bring feedback to someone or a slight correction. And, not that you just are in anger or feel you need to do it, but hopefully constructive, helpful correction. But in my heart, I felt frustrated, agitated at times with that individual. I've experienced that. I don't know if you have. But the Lord in the recent little while just showed me to let it go. Pursue relationship, get together and just enjoy that individual. And if the opportunity for feedback comes up, he'll give it. I think what he's showing me is it's more about my heart going in the right spirit. And when my heart is right, I'm flowing in love. And it's more about the relationship than truth before it's time. Then I'm released. And I have felt that experience that all of a sudden where my heart shifted to, I just miss that person. I just want to connect. I just want to get together. I don't care if this really comes up, although I sense it's supposed to. It's almost like, the ball drop. Ding. It's like God saying you're released. But there's no pressure. There's no anxiety. There's no agitation. And it's like more the state of heart. My heart is flowing in love. My heart is flowing in peace. And then it would be like the way Father would deal with us, because he's always flowing in love and always flowing in peace. But he does bring us gentle correction, right? At times when he needs to. But we never know we've been spanked. It's so good. But the second part of that verse is peacemaker, in verse 18, actually, the next verse, peacemakers who sow in peace reap a harvest of righteousness. That's the part that really hit me. And I actually think I was in a meeting, and Jody could expand on it if she was on, but I think she really actually got it. When we go in peace and our hearts are in peace, our hearts are in love, there will be a multiplication of good fruit and good results out of it. That's the part. You know, when we go prematurely, we try to fix a problem prematurely, an interpersonal conflict, make someone see something in their heart they're not ready to see, it's not going to bring the fruit or the results. But I feel like he's saying, when our hearts are flowing in love, when the condition of our hearts is only love, only relationship, happy to get together, not anxious about it, there's going to be good fruit, and there's going to be a multiplication of fruit and a multiplication of effective results. I'm excited about that. So just take any part of that speaks to you. And I'm basically done. I really felt that this is a season with everything going on. We need to receive his peace. We need to watch when our hearts go to anxiety or we're overly sad, because he's in us and we can receive his peace, which is also walking in a level of faith, right? That he's a good God, no matter what our circumstances are, and he's going to do what he says he's going to do. That's it.
Very good. Super. What's do you know the verse, Jen? What you sow in peace, you'll reap.
I just quoted it, James 3:17 and 18.
Okay.
Yeah.
I get that sense that is just connecting some of the dots here. Sandy, when you heard "Come Away," and he's inviting you to be with him, and it would have been, I suspect, a very peaceful time. And you're sowing into yourself, if you will. You're sowing him into you. You're responding to your, biblically, the bridegroom, if you will, and that what you reap is that righteousness, that right alignment. What that word means, that rightness and connectivity. It's kind of what you're talking about, Dave. And in that place, in that connection, in that union with him, man, that's the secret. That's that childlikeness. That's that place of being not like, becoming childlike, not just trying to mimic it. It's beautiful. Does anyone feel like I know kind of went after these individuals today, and thank you so much, Lance and Dave and Sandy and Jen. That is incredibly rich. And it's the danger is that you just keep hearing it. It's almost like going to the smorgasbord. You go to the really fancy restaurants. They don't make your plate so full. They give you just enough to you to appreciate the slow bites. But if you go to we had one here called the Fable Table. I don't know if you remember that, dear. And we take the kids there because you could line up and you could go back. I mean, you get in that line and you just down it and go back into the line, and only took a few visits to look around the restaurant and realize, there was quite a few people taking advantage of all you can eat. And I wonder sometimes the way you're talking about it, Dave, we can be so, I'm really believing that there's a lady in our congregation, her husband, who in the community that have had a picture, a word, a dream, about the difference between a family and a restaurant. And I'm hoping that they'll be able to share it soon. But when you put all the effort into a restaurant in the sense of, and people just keep consuming, that's not the point. The point is for us to be transformed. And it's a promise, 2 Corinthians 3:18, that we are being transformed into the image of a son, into that is just like Jesus. That is going to happen, as our friends say, like people like James Jordan. The only question is, will will most of it happen on the other side of eternity, or will you let it happen here? And so that transformation is what we all long for, is for our hearts to be able to experience that garden, what you said, Dave, to be in that place where the fig leaves are gone and life is flowing, and connecting with other people in that way. It's beautiful. So before I'm just going to hit the breakout. So hang in there for a bit and just pray with each other. For those who wonder about what to pray with respect to, say, something like what's going on in Ukraine, I really think Psalm 10, 15, 16 to 17 really comes to bear here. And it goes, and not that you're praying this directly, but all these protests are going around the world. It's incredible. Today I got some more pictures from people who are in close to Ukraine. In fact, James Jordan is where he's at right now in Europe, outside of his hotel room. All the people protesting, and he was on Facebook chatting about it, saying it's just we have a voice, and the voice can go up vertically, but if there's a place. But it's interesting. This one was sent to me by a leader in one of our churches who is over in Israel right now at the Wailing Wall, if you will, praying with people for peace. And he sent me this verse, and it really struck me as I read it. It's basically, so Psalms is David's heart lament, but it goes, Psalms 10:15, break the arm of the wicked man. Call the evildoer to account for his wickedness. That would not otherwise be found out. The Lord is king forever and ever, and the nations will perish from his land, his kingdom. You, Lord, hear the desire of the afflicted. You encourage them, and you listen to their cry, defending the fatherless and the oppressed, so that the mere earthly mortals will never again strike terror. And when we think of shaking and this kind of stuff, it reminds me of the people in Ukraine praying what's in, I think it's Acts 9, where they pray for boldness. I was talking with someone about this yesterday. They were online here a bit about boldness. And the boldness wasn't an arrogance. Boldness was that love would flow. Like the incredible power of the kingdom is not some mystical power. It's that substance of his very spirit, his very nature, the nature of the personality of his being. That's what was poured out in Pentecost. That very thing, his very nature. We are partakers, Peter says, of the divine nature. And that's why he's come and built his home in us. And as that percolates through our hearts, as that percolates through our old wineskin thinking and what we put our faith in, maybe it's structures or people or whatever, or even our political systems or those things, for us, for that peace is to let that nature fully. And I guarantee you, when we pray from that place of Son, we get to hear him. We're not just repeating scripture as if somehow that's going to change the situations. What we're hearing is what someone else wrote, who was in the midst of that kind of stuff, and how they called out to God. Oh, break the arm of this evil person. Let that which is hidden come to the surface. For the mere mortals, when we know that your kingdom, there's no nation on the planet that is going to overcome. It will not last compared to your kingdom. And do this in that last part so that this terror, big word there, the terror would end. So I just want to encourage us. My bit today, obviously not going to happen. So it'll come out more, but I really have been feeling God talking about it. In 2 weeks' time, we'll do another online one. But how the movement from the obedience of servants to the harmony of sons, and that's some of that, what I was hearing out of Dave and Lance and Sandy and Jen, is there is a difference in how a family operates. And it's not perfected sons and daughters. But there is a letting go of identities about, as Lance said, what do you want me to do next? What do you want me to do next? It'd be do you want me to go to the hot tub? Should I invite Bella to come over? She wants to, but should I, kind of, it's now the harmony in with him. What's his heart about? And we've heard it so much. So one of the things that really touches, and it's just pervasive, is how does that translate into what we call prayer, or what the Bible calls prayer? And it's a big thing, because the disciples noticed something about Jesus in his sonship that they were far from. But how do you do that? How do you interact with Yahweh? They had at that point no idea he was their father, but they're watching him interact with him in a unity and in a union, in a way that's not, principle based by saying the right thing at the right time. It's heart, it's union. And so lots in that, but I just want to encourage us, that coming away and being with him, Sandy, I thank you for allowing me to probe you to share that, because that is what he's doing with, I believe, all of us in a certain way, not, differently. He comes to all our hearts uniquely. No one else knows your heart like he does. And so he's drawing us into that. So, landing the plane, we circled a few times there. So I hope you're okay with that.